Guys, you're going to get a handout that's going to come pass it around. Actually, I think we have enough for just probably one per couple right now. I'm going to give you some homework out of this, actually. So what we're going to do is we're going to have about 15 minutes. We're going to just talk about a couple principles I think will really be valuable as we go into our talk tonight. And then after that, John and Janie are going to come up. Allison's going to join me, and Rick and Sherry are going to come up. So one of the things I want to say right in the beginning of this, though, you know, when you had the dating class last week, the married people, we're trying to really, we're a family, and understanding each other is really valuable, what's going on. But even if you're single, a lot of the principles I'm going to be talking about tonight are extremely applicable to your life. So I know that when Allison and I were growing up as young Christians, we wouldn't go to child raising classes to try to learn more about, we were planning on having children one day, so learning those different things. So whoever you are and whatever situation you're in life, I think you'll find a lot of valuable things from the things that we talk about tonight. So, hey, I don't know if have people seen pictures from the wedding this past week? It was an incredible thing. I don't have one to show you right now, but it was on top of a mountain, and there was a picture that was taken that really, it looked like we were in the sky almost. It was really, really a beautiful setting, and it went incredibly well. I had a few little adventurous things. Getting up on that mountain was a wild thing. If anyone in here was there? Okay, yeah, so a few of us were there. And getting up on there, on Tuesday, the Muellers asked if we could join them and ride in this van to make sure it could get to the top. So otherwise, if it didn't work, then we weren't going to be able to have it on the mountain. So we got on there, and it was, you know, if you're on the Disney Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, it was like that, but a little more steep, all right? But it was a pretty interesting ride, so. But it was great, a beautiful wedding. And one of the verses, speaking of weddings, why I brought that up too, is that one of the most common verses that people ask when I've done weddings before is Ecclesiastes 4, verse 9. And I want you to turn there because I think you'll find it beneficial. Ecclesiastes 4, verse 9. Sorry, I'm trying to get there real quick. I'm getting there. So in verse 9, it says this: "Two are better than one because they have a good return for their work. If one falls down, his friend can help him up. But pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken." And I think sometimes when we talk about marriage, we immediately start thinking about our relationship with our spouse. And that's a major part of it, obviously. But this cord of 3 strands is what I really want to talk a little bit about tonight. Because, and this was where I really want you singles to be thinking about this too. Whether you're interested in being married or not, just as a human, as a disciple, the concept of really, in order to have the 3 strands, you as an individual have to be connected, tightly woven with God. And so one of the beautiful things about Emily and Gatlin's marriage was they both grew up with hearts as disciples. And they had that tight bond with Christ. And so God directed their dating relationship. God directed them in so many different ways. And so when they got married, that strand of 3, that strand of God, was already tightly wound and woven into each life. So bringing them together, they had the strength of marriage. It was really interesting doing pre-marriage counseling with them because they were so mature in so many ways, more mature than a lot of the older adults that we've done counseling with. And their communication was incredible. But it goes back a lot to this mindset of the strand of 3, but in your individual life, it's critical for you to have that connection with each other. So I really... I want you, as you are sitting in the room right now, just think about this. In the last year, have you grown closer to Christ? If you're married, if you're not doing that, actually, it's harmful to your relationship. Because if the relationship is found with Christ woven through you, one of the things that I do a lot in medicine is I take care of tendon problems. And tendon problems, you heard the term tendonitis, but actually if you look inside of a tendon that hurts, almost none of the tendons have inflammation in them. What they have is a disorganized fibers. They're pulling apart, and they're not as strong as they normally are. And so the trick in what I do is to try to get those tendons to heal. That's why sometimes you do a cortisone shot. It doesn't really fix anything because it's not stopping. There's certain places it does, but with a tendon that's frayed, it doesn't help it a tiny bit. And so it's like that in our life. When the tendon, when the strand of three starts separating, just like tendons, it causes significant pain in your life. And when you pull away from Christ, you not only hurt yourself, but you hurt your partner as well. And if you're roommates in the house, it's the same way. So this concept of working together as three is really a powerful thing in marriage, but it's in every relationship. And so as you think about that, your connection with God is critical to every relationship you have in your life. And when you make this commitment to be married to each other, you're bringing Christ into that. The strongest marriages I've ever seen are those that are wound tightly into Christ. So having said that, I just want to talk about a couple other things as we go this. So what we talk a lot about in marriage and pre-marriage counseling is that one of the few things you can control in life, you can't control the weather. You can't control what's happening at your job a lot of times. You can't control what's happening in the country. You can't control elections. You can't control finances. You can't control all these different things. You can control the culture in your home. Whatever home you live in, married or single, you are the one that controls that. Nobody else. So the culture that you create in your home is a choice that you make, and what you bring into it and what you don't. And so I want you, if someone look at Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. I just want someone to read it out loud for me. What I want you to think about, this is a section, actually, that's that whole paragraph of Deuteronomy 6, 4. And I want you to look at that because a lot of times we think about this. This is a great scripture talking about your children. It talks about impressing things on your children. And that's true. But I want you to read it again and think about it from the perspective of being married or even being in a home where you're not married, but you have disciples together. So who will read that for me? Deuteronomy 6. It's just easier for you guys to do it than me pull it up. Tab, you got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
How far am I reading?
Just start in the beginning of that paragraph where it talks about impressing on your children.
6:4.
Yes.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates.
All right, I want you to stop and think. Who is that really written to? The kids? Who? The parents, the marriage. They're supposed to create a culture in their home when they talk about the love of God, when they talk about obeying Him, when they talk about teaching the children. The parents both need to be doing that. He's telling the parents that that's what they're supposed to do to the children. That's true, but they have to create that culture in their home where that's what you talk about. You talk about Jesus. You talk about the Bible. You talk about the church. You talk about spiritual things. You help each other. You have an atmosphere of great fun, great joy, great love. We'll talk about that in just a second. But the reality is that actually takes you as parents to create that culture, but that's what you talk about. And it's totally comfortable. Because where are they going to learn that? Sometimes we think, Jeannie and John are doing a great job with the teens. That's a beautiful thing. But I will tell you, if the parents don't have that in the culture at home, it doesn't work very well. The church isn't going to, the most powerful influence in their life is you as a mom and dad. And so it depends on the culture you create. Do you create a culture in your home where people want what you have? So going a little bit farther down in this, 1 Corinthians 13, we all know this. What does it happen when you say something really wise or brilliant or whatever it might be, but that doesn't have love in it? You're a clanging gong, you're a cymbal. You just make noise. So in your home, I know looking back in my life in times that I was absolutely right about what I said, but it wasn't done in love, it didn't work. So each one of us, you create that. So think about, what does love look like? And, you look at Jesus, you look at all the different things, and you can read 1 Corinthians 13 if you want to go further into it. But when I thought about this, the things I wrote down in marriage that I think are really critical and need to be in most homes more is an atmosphere of joy, of just happiness being together, not letting the world come in and destroy that. An atmosphere of encouragement. How often do you encourage your spouse? Every one of you should be encouraging your spouse multiple times every day. Does that describe you? If you want a great marriage, you need to do that. That's a culture you're creating. If the children grow up and they don't see that, you're hurting your children. Not only that, you're hurting your spouse. What about this? To me, love is listening. Wanting to hear what your spouse has to say. Not just listening while you're playing with your phone or watching TV, but giving them attention and trying to understand what they are saying and where they're coming from. This is really important in conflict. I also thought about kindness. Are you growing in kindness? Would people walk in your house and say, you treat your spouse with such incredible kindness? Do they see that? That's what love looks like to people. How about mercy? Are you a forgiving, merciful person, or you will not let that go? See, those are aspects of love that you want to make sure in your house you're creating that culture. If you read in Luke chapter 8, someone read Luke chapter 8, verse 14 for me. So what I want you to think about is what unravels that cord of 3. In your life, Satan is trying to unravel you. He's trying to unravel you from your spouse, trying to unravel you from your roommates if you're not married. He tries to unravel you from God every single day. He's trying to unwind you. That's what happens with tendons. That's what happens in marriages. That's what happens, is he slowly pulls you apart and picks you apart so you lose the strength of that bond. So what is Luke 8:14? Someone read it for me. Go. Loud.
The seed that fell among thorns stands for those who hear. But as they go on their way, they're choked by life's worries, riches, and pleasures, and they do not mature.
Okay, so what chokes out marriages? Those very things. I want you to think about, and just throw these thoughts out for a minute. What is it that pulls people out? Life's worries, the pleasures, pursuing things. What else pulls us apart? What about cell phones? I want you to think about this. How much time do you spend sitting with your spouse looking at your phone? One of the good things about being in North Carolina is the reception was horrible. Most of the time we didn't have phone access. And then some days we had no internet access at all. And so it was just, we didn't have it. And you couldn't sit there and look at your phone. You actually had to talk to people. But I just want you to think about it. I really encourage you to look at what Satan is trying to pull you apart with. And he will try to do that. He'll pull you apart with anything. It doesn't always have to be a bad thing. But think about how many hours you spend playing a game a day and how many minutes you spend talking to your spouse. And how many times at the end of the day you want to wind down and you think you're going to use the phone for 30 minutes and 2 hours later it's bedtime, right? Maybe none of you have ever done that before. But it happens. How about television? How about games? There's a lot of things that are not bad things, but they can unwind your connection with God, unwind your connection with each other. I just want to throw these things out as we start the discussion because it's up to us, it's up to you together to create that culture in your home that's one of love, or one that binds you together. One or two more things I want to say, and then we're going to have questions. So I want you to think about questions that you want to ask. But we've talked about this a lot before, but there's a guy named Chapman who does a lot of these incredible studies. And one of the main things, he will put people in these rooms, and they'll stay like in an apartment for a weekend, and he can tell you with I think it's 60 or 70% accuracy who will be divorced in 5 years. And it's based on your response to bids of your partner. So let's say I say something to Allison and she ignores it. Let's say she says something nice to me, just tries to make conversation and I ignore her. Especially if I put down what she's saying, the chance of divorce is extremely high. So I want you to think about it. As your spouse initiates any kind of contact with you, are you open to those things? Do you respond back? Did you respond, or you just kind of do what you want? Again, Those are important things. The other thing, you just got a handout. At the top of that handout on the front page is some ideas. When we do pre-marriage counseling, we always talk about those things because they're common things that cause marriage problems. And you should look at that if you're married and think, are these things happening in our marriage? Okay, because are these problems? Because don't ignore them. The second thing on there is what's called, I think, is it emotional needs or which one's second? The 5 love languages. So one of the things that we really encourage people to do right away when we do our pre-marriage counseling is you really should know the love language of your spouse. Allison's is acts of service. So if I really want to make her feel loved, I should really try to do an act of service every day, right? I should actually be looking for things to serve her because I love her. So I don't, we're liable to do those things that we like most with our spouse, but I really want to challenge you and think about, do you really think about your spouse? What about if you prayed every day, God, help me to have this quality in my life to help her to feel loved, or to help him feel loved, for you ladies? You really, that's one of the things I've really tried to do is pray about those kind of things and add them into my life so that I'm aware of it and thinking of it. The other one is the 10 emotional needs. And I think this is an incredible, valuable thing. And most of you have probably heard of these, but we strongly encourage people to go through those regularly. Pick out the top 2 or 3 things that are most critical to you in your life at this time. Talk to them about it with your spouse. Relationships are incredibly more vulnerable if you are ignoring the emotional needs of your spouse. And there's a whole concept. Affairs are way, way, way more likely if you ignore the top 2 or 3 needs of your spouse. There's a lot, but so I really encourage you, don't just have this piece of paper. We didn't send this out so you could look at it and throw it away. I really want you to take a look at that and try to spend some time honestly saying, these 2 things are my most important emotional needs that I want for Allison to meet. She should know that. And each of you should want to know that. And you can strengthen your marriage. The funny thing about that, 6 months from now, it may be different. So I encourage you to do that intermittently, not just one time. It's like not telling your spouse one time, I love you. It doesn't cover all times. Neither does going over the emotional needs list. So guys, take time you want your marriage to be good. You're actually going to have to work at it. It's going to take work. It's going to take effort. I encourage you to get advice. The last 2 pages on that are things, we think Allison wrote them down. Those are some thoughts about marriage that we encourage you to read to enhance your marriage. There's a whole lot of ideas. Take your time through that. Go through these things. This is just hopefully a helpful handout, but it will do no help at all if you don't take time to study it. So I encourage you to. If you're single, look through some of those things. Learn about who you are. It's a good thing to know. Look at some of the things on the 2nd and 3rd pages. Those things are good for everybody to know. So hopefully that's helpful for you. If we can have the panel come on up here, we're going to have a discussion and talk about this. So what we want you to do is we can bring up things, but we really would like if you have a question about marriage, if you have a question whether you're single, whether you're married, everybody has input into this, has the opportunity to ask questions. So if you guys would come on up. So anybody have any questions about marriage that you think would be a good question to ask? All right, Chris. Hey, brother, I'm proud of you. Good job. I'll bring that. So can you say kind of loud? We'll repeat your question.
So my message is, how do you guys keep your marriage fresh and remain in love for all these years?
All right. So you're trying to say, Chris, that we're old? No, no, brother. It was a great question. I'm just picking on you. So the question was, how do you keep your marriage fresh with time? And we all have a few hours of marriage in here. So, Chris, I'm just playing with you. But I think it's a great question. How do you keep it fresh and growing through time? Correct? Is that the question? All right. So what do you guys think? Anybody have ideas on that? Allison? Go ahead.
I never let her feel unattractive.
Hey, that's true. He's really, really good about
closer to your face.
He's
gotta almost touch your
really
lips.
good about that, and that would have been a deep, it still is an insecurity for me, but it would have been a deep, deep crippling insecurity for me if he did not work that way. That is a big thing.
Yeah.
Partnering in the church stuff, caring about other people and loving them together, and that has made a big difference because there's always something new. There's always kingdom work that we love. You still can't hear me?
Yeah, you almost have to
All
put
right.
it almost on your lips.
I do not want that on my mouth. Okay. I said that partnering in gospel type work, like caring about people in the church and having them over and there's always conversation. I mean, I've heard other couples say, what do you talk about at the end of the day? And I mean, we don't really do sports. We'll be here Sunday, but we don't do that. So it is something that we care about genuinely and are always passionate about. And so it's easy to have ongoing conversation and new ventures and things we feel called into that generally feel new and fresh and like an adventure. So that's part of it. And then date nights.
I do want to comment on that, what Jenny just said. I think one of the best things that happened in our marriage when we became Christians is actually being a team, reaching out to the world around us. It was something we were excited about. We saw our lives change. We saw other people change. We communicated about it. It was a passion of our life, and I really think Satan wants everyone to be quiet because it's such a powerful tool to strengthen your marriage, and change lives. But your marriage will grow incredibly well if you partner together working for the gospel. It's like anything. When you have a team that works together, it's a beautiful thing. And as our children got older, they were part of it. So, guys, if you're not doing that, you're missing an incredible opportunity to really grow your marriage in a great way. Rick or Sherry?
Well, Sherry and I, we have different interests outside the house. I play pickleball. Sherry does her art. And we talk about it. I'll tell her about my pickleball and the people I may have talked to there, and she'll talk to me about things like that. And then we talk about a lot of different things, but that is different day by day. And I think that keeps things fresh there, and just having different days every day.
And also, through it all, I think just having a sense of humor with each other.
Yeah.
Really being able to laugh about stuff and just share that kind of relationship where you can laugh at each other respectfully. But, at this age, we get a lot more opportunities to do that than we used to have. So, anyway, just loving the life God's given you and knowing that He's the source of whatever blessings we have. It's keeping that in our mind. So
I have one more quick
I'm off
thing.
track a little.
Just new shared hobbies. So we picked up kayaking a few years back, and that was just fun. And so looking for things we can do together that are active and outside of the house that you can lean into. That's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that recreational companionship concept of doing something together for fun. And it can be new things, too. It doesn't have to be what you've always done. I think keeping things fresh with maybe just spending any time together. One of the things that's helpful for us is when we're in a car driving them together, there's not that many distractions. When we're home, you got to think about cleaning this or doing that, or things happen. So I would say take every opportunity when you're together to truly communicate. I think that's really, really valuable. Go ahead.
So I have 3 fun facts. So how do you deal with small conflict versus big conflict? I know it's all kind of the same, but a small thing versus something that's detrimental.
Okay, so the question is, how do you deal with conflicts? Bring up 2 different potential conflicts. Small, when you just may have a disagreement. Large, when you get boxing gloves on, okay? No, she didn't say that. But the concept of there's different intensity of disagreement sometimes. So how do you deal with those conflicts in a marriage? Anybody who's ready to?
So a couple of years back, we went to a marriage seminar. I don't even remember where it was. But they had this little card that they handed out. I had mine for a while. I've lost it. But it basically had a picture of kind of a mountain with a 0 to 5 going across the top. And it basically said, is this argument a hill that's worth dying on? And so for the longest time, I've always asked myself that question. So within that, if it's not a hill worth dying on, I usually will let it go. Now, if it keeps coming back up, it will progressively kind of work its way up that chart. But usually somewhere around the 3 point is when I'm like, okay, we need to talk about this. And so if it's below the 3, I just let it go. Usually it's happens once, maybe once a year kind of thing. Or, it'll progress its way up to where I'm like, hey, we got to deal with this.
I was thinking just not letting things build up. If there's something that's bothering you, or there's a problem there, you've got to be willing to speak the truth in love. And maybe it's something you have to look at in yourself, but just being honest when there's something there that you're concerned about, instead of ignoring it and saying, that's not a big deal. I mean, not that you're, no. But I mean, for us, because little things bother me if I don't deal with them. So, yeah.
The other thing I'd say along with that is all marriages are different. Yeah. So people approach things in a different way. So sometimes it's easier to deal with things. Sometimes it's easier just to let it go.
Yep. Yep.
I was just thinking about, too, like when it's a little thing like you're asking about, Celia, that, sorry.
Okay.
I think it's important to understand why you're upset. Because a lot of times it's not about the thing you're arguing about. You're tired, or you're hungry, or you're mad about the kids were bad that day, or whatever. But it's like really being aware of what's going on with your spouse, with you. And then there's a book that I think I listed it on that handout. It's called Everybody Wins by Gary Chapman. It's like a short book. Takes like an hour to read, but it changed our lives because it talks about how to resolve conflict in marriage. And it talks a lot about how you've got to see yourself as being on the same side. You're not, if I win, he loses. You don't want to be like that. You both to win. So it's like listening to understand when you're mad, try to understand their point of view is really good.
Yeah, I do think that concept in everybody, whoever you are, wherever you're at in life, is learning to try, if there's a disagreement, learning how to understand where the other person is coming from. Because there's usually some validity to what they're saying. They may be being too emotional or something, but there's usually something there. And if your goal is to try to understand and not get caught up in the emotion, you can avoid a lot of things. The other thing that's really valuable with that is if Allison knows that I have hurt her. So a lot of times in conflict, you're more important, you're trying to prove your point or make your point. But if you can actually make sure I understand and say that you understand so that she would really know that you heard her. Because so many problems is you don't think the other person is listening to you because they're probably not. And then they both get more upset. But if you can let them know, I understand you're saying this, that makes sense because of this, it changes it. And Allison talking about, again, the concept of if you win an argument, that usually means you defeated your spouse and separated yourself. So if you can come together and communicate effectively, it's really, really important. Rick, you have something?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue that I think plays into this is our pride and letting that go. And I've had to examine myself in the middle of stuff and say, I got to let it go and grab a hold of a big bucket of humility and be willing to admit when I'm wrong and even when I think I'm right, not hold it over and, not say, well, I'm right and you need to go my way. No, let's talk it through and come to some kind of conclusion where we can both feel like we're good. We've got it clear.
I'm just thinking, listening to each other and respecting each other. And, you respect that person. When there's something there, you listen to them, even if, like Rick said, you may not agree with it, just showing respect. And then you got to give a lot of grace because you need it yourself.
Yeah, have mercy. Yeah.
Yeah, you really need to. So,
A really valuable tool that Allison and I have learned, and we talk a lot about, is something called safe time. I think a lot of you probably heard this. But that safe time is having a time scheduled in your life where you can sit down and your spouse or your roommate, this is a valuable thing to learn before you're married, is where you actually communicate, this is bothering me, and the other person has to agree they're not going to withdraw affection, they're not going to attack you, they're not going to, because they really want to hear what's on your heart. And if you can learn to want to know what's going on, like Allison knows me better than anyone, any human in the world, all right? So she knows my weaknesses and she knows my strengths. And so if she can help me to become a better disciple, a better man, or a better husband, I really should want to listen. So if you have this time called safe time where you set it aside, say, I want to know what I can do better. I want to know what's going on in my life. I really encourage you all to set that up. And again, you don't have to be married to do that. This is a great lesson to learn as a disciple. Just every one of us should want to know, how can I become more like Jesus? And I think if you can set that up in your home, and that way it's a prevention to getting to any conflict a lot of times. You said you had more? Oh my goodness. Okay.
How do you do when you sat down, you've done everything, but you just cannot see eye to eye? Like whatever is going on, you just cannot find that common ground, you cannot see eye to eye.
Okay, so what if you have this conflict and you cannot see eye to eye on it? What do you do? So I think boxing gloves are in order. I'm a little stronger, so I usually win that boxing glove thing. So that way we solve it. No. Any thoughts?
I have one, kind of. A lot of our fights that have been like that actually haven't been over where do we move or big, big, big decisions, which is what I thought it would be before I got married. It has really been over, we just had a fight, and I don't understand how he got where he was thinking, and he doesn't understand how I got where I was thinking, and we're both still mad, and we think if we keep talking some more that the other person will get it, and it's really, really unhelpful. And in that instance, we've had to learn to, face each other and say, I don't see it the same way, but I love you, I love Jesus, and we want to move forward, and we're still in this together. And would you agree that's most of I think our biggest battles are about that, because it's challenging when you're in a marriage because they're the person you love the most, that you're doing life with, and when they disagree with you, when they don't get where you're coming from, it's very, very painful. And you want them to get it. And so, but sometimes they just aren't, because we're human. God understands where you're coming from, and that has to be enough. And so as long as you're willing to move forward in peace and say, I love you, we're going to try to move forward.
In my house growing up, it was he who yelled the loudest won. And I brought that baggage into the marriage. And so for the longest time, that was how I fought. And Jenny did not fight that way. And so it was very easy in the beginning of the wedding or marriage to win an argument, because I would just yell louder, and her family did not do that. And so she would just kind of cower back. After 31 years of marriage, she's learned no longer to cower back. And so we really have had to develop that, let's take a breather, let's think about this for a moment. And honestly, after 31 years of marriage, sometimes we just agree to disagree. And the faster you can learn to do that, the better it is.
A couple of other thoughts I have on that too is a lot of, just saying it in maybe a different way, is that a lot of it is that when you get the emotion out of it, it becomes much more clear. So if you can step back and pray about it and then come back together, it's really much easier to solve things. Sometimes you just need to say, and this is something we talk about a lot, is if it's not going well, say, listen, let's talk about this tomorrow. Let's pray about it. And then the second part of that is to get advice. So all couples should have another couple that they can go to and say, hey, we're struggling with this. Listen to what we have to say, and then talk about it. It's funny, though, if you go and talk, let's say I went and talked to John, and Allison went and talked to Jenny, they would come together and say, this is a different argument. We see it so differently. That happened to us one time. We were talking to a couple, and they were like, that's totally different than what Chris said. So I think sometimes if you step back out of it, you can really get a lot of information. But I encourage you to have someone else in your marriage that you have agreement. Allison can talk to this person, Chris can talk to this person. about the marriage, and then get together, pray about it, and a lot of those things can be worked out once you get the emotion out of the way with that.
My goal, too, when I get advice, is I try to share exactly like I would say it if Chris was sitting right there, because I don't want to be a false witness. Because I'm always going to want to tell my side of the story, but that's not going to help if I'm not fair for what he was saying, too. So that's just a little aside.
Anything?
Again, kind of to go along with what they've already said, the goal in any kind of disagreement or argument or whatever is that you grow stronger in your marriage, and you want that. You know, I keep thinking about my role, and I've been talking to Tara about this because, you know, they have things they're going through, and I just say, you know, you're his helpmeet, and in the biblical sense, I want him to be the best version of himself he can be, the best father, the best brother, the best husband. And if I have that goal that God has, then God's going to work through my frailty and weakness and his too to bring about good things. So if that's the goal and it's not a pride thing, I had to deal with emotion early in our marriage. I still do on occasion. You know, so we were very different in our form of communicating. And anyway, I've grown only because I've gotten input, I've read books, and gone to communication marriage workshops, and they've really helped us. So anyway, I just strongly encourage that.
I was just thinking, too, some of the times that we've had an argument that we couldn't resolve, it's funny because later you look back and it was so obvious, you know, that God was, I mean, really praying, giving it to God, trusting him that he's going to work through it. So.
Preferably two pieces of advice to go along with this. One, make sure it's somebody who's of the same sex that you're confiding in. I have watched a lot of marriages at work be destroyed because somebody will go to complain to a lonely woman about their wife, and that lonely woman will simply just tell them, oh, how great they are and how terrible their wife is, and that leads to bad decisions. The second thing along with that is find somebody who knows both of you, because a lot of times they have invaluable witness power in your life to be able to say, yeah, I think you probably messed this up.
Yep. So. And the last thing about conflict if handled right, you actually will grow. Which is good. Go ahead.
So the last one I have is, have you ever like gotten into a funk where it's just like not really moving, but you're just like, kind of like in a funk, but if you have been in, like how did you get out of it?
Okay.
So funk meaning like,
Okay.
I love you, but like I'm just bored.
Okay.
I guess that's the best way.
Allison's never had that experience. I mean, come on. You know. Okay. So the question is, do you ever get in a marriage where you get into a rut, and it's just you're existing together, and if so, how do you get it back into the thrill of life? All right. So, any thoughts on that? Have you ever had that happen? Anybody?
I will say that ours was based on John having depression. And when you live with somebody who is depressed, you take on some of those qualities because it doesn't feel like it's going to end. And you don't know what to expect on a regular basis. And joy is hard and planning is hard because you don't know if they're going to feel like going anywhere and if it's going to be a disaster if you do go. And so we have had a couple of different seasons, but one was fairly long that was like that. And what I will say is, knowing that he loved the Lord, even when he was really down, he worked hard to say, and not every day, but in seasons, he really did work hard to figure out, okay, what of this could possibly be in my control? If it is that I need to exercise some more, if it is that I have got to be in the Word, if it is that we do have to go out to these things, he really did make an effort and see doctors and work on everything he could work on. And so it really was, a lot of that was just pushing through. I mean, there's just no way around saying it any way that was differently. It was difficult. Now we had kids, we had beautiful times in there too, but it was praying a lot. It was, I have verses that are manna verses for me that I clung to help get through dinner sometimes because I'm trying to be in a good mood for the kids. And So I think it is clinging to God. It is believing that your spouse is doing the same, and it is trying to still find fun things to do together. We got time alone to try to make that work, and we did spend time with other people, and we would go to family group. Wait, y'all are life group or family? Whatever y'all call it.
Whatever you
Small
call it.
group.
Doesn't
Okay.
matter, though.
We go to small group, and he would be honest. Like, nobody, he would not have wanted to go. He's in a bad mood the whole way there. But we would get there, and he was completely transparent. So if you are in this kind of setting and you are in a funk, please be honest with the people in your life, because he could go and say, I have been totally rude to Jenny's what came out sometimes, and I have not been in a good place, husband or parent, and I need help while I'm here. And then we would talk and laugh, and every time we left, it was better. And so, but if he had gone and hidden it, and I had to pretend things were fine because it wasn't okay to share it, we'd have had an entirely different experience, and I would have quit going. There would have been no point. So be honest and vulnerable and transparent with the people around you. Look for new ways and push through, and trust that there is beauty on the other side, because that is what God wants.
You had some? I guess so. I'll say a couple of things in that. I think really it happens when you're too busy, and for me, my life. Allison's I work a lot. I do all these different things, and sometimes the focus is issues going on in the church, and I'm trying to deal with all those things. So I think that's been hard for Allison probably at some times. But I do think it's critical. John mentioned, or Jenny mentioned this right at the beginning, is having times we realize is we need to have a date, and we need to get out of that routine and not talk about any of it, so that we focus on each other and get back to that. So it's like, we've been in a lot of leadership rules through the years, and so a lot of times we're at home trying to figure out how to make this better, how to do this, and it can become the focus of what's happening, and it can get in the way of a closer relationship. So we've had to specifically say, we can't talk about this, we can't talk about this, let's go out and have fun.
Can I say one thing about that real quick?
Yeah.
Because if you're really in a funk, going out and sitting together alone in a restaurant can feel like more funk, a
Yeah.
deeper funk.
Yes.
Like, this is awful.
Right.
And so John actually was really cool. In that time, he actually looked up dating questions and like things for couples to do on a date and talk about discussion things that weren't generated by anything going on in our life or any of the baggage. And they were fun and light, and some of them were deeper and goal-oriented, but he worked at it. He planned for the date for there to be something to talk about when he wasn't in the mood to have a conversation. And I really appreciated that, because it took work on his end and it made me feel special.
So I think we've established I was a terrible husband.
Not established that.
I have established that I was a terrible husband. But if you feel like you're a terrible husband too, I can help you with that. Just to say, because I have learned lessons by failing. That's how my whole life has gone. But within that as well, what I want to say that I don't think has been covered yet is you are responsible for your actions. And so if you feel like the marriage is in the funk and you haven't yet said, how can I make it different? That's where you need to start. The movie Fireproof is great for that. If you've never seen Fireproof, that's the point of that movie. So.
And I do want to reiterate something that John said earlier. Be careful who you go to for advice in that situation. When you are in a funk, you are very vulnerable. And someone showing you attention or affection leads to separation a lot of times. Be really smart about who you go to.
I think it's really important, too, to pray, to love that person. I think we think that we should just be in love with this person and love things about them, and it should just happen. And we can really pray to God to give us that love for them. And if it's waned, to give it back and to help you love like 1 Corinthians 13 talks about. So,
Yeah, a prevention step 2 is try to grow every day. Don't let yourself stay the same. If your spouse knows you're trying to grow and change, there's a lot of encouragement in that.
I was just thinking, too, when there's a lot of stress in a relationship, sometimes you can neglect the body, and really the best thing for your marriage is to be really involved and committed to the body of Christ. And even though you maybe don't feel like it sometimes, or, again, I want to help Rick be the strongest Christian he can be. And so therefore, even when I don't feel like it, I'm going to do the things I know that God wants me to do that could strengthen my faith in God, my relationship with God, and the people around me. And if I'm involved in doing those things, it's going to be good for our relationship and it's going to help him. So I commit myself to doing that, even some days when I don't feel like doing what I should be doing as a Christian. So just saying denying yourself in that sense at times.
I don't recall times where we've been in a funk of any kind. There have been times of feeling just being overwhelmed with everything, and we try to somehow to take a break. And it was more when the kids were younger and we were trying to take care of them and everything else going on at the time. So we just find a way, and that doesn't give you a lot of detail about it, but.
All right, so two things. We probably have time for one question, then we have to finish. The other thing I would just want to bring up, if you have questions about marriage or issues or things, one of the reasons we're doing this is it's good to talk about them. So don't feel like, oh, I didn't get my question answered. Talk to somebody about it. That's one of the great things about having the same goal. We all want to become like Christ. We all want to have great marriages. We all want to have great connections. Talk to each other about it. Don't wait for next meeting of this type. You have each other. God put us together for that reason. So I think it's really, really valuable. One more question, if anyone has a question. We got them all answered. Bonnie?
This is a question, that's something that we did. My husband and I were married for 41 years. And sometimes when we get in conflict, we had a couple in the church that were supposed to help us raise our kids. And we go to do everything. Tell me something positive about you. It's something that I might not have thought about. And we pray about it.
Okay. If I heard you right, it's make a deliberate effort to say something positive to each other about that. I do think the encouragement principle is so critical. I really, guys, think we should do that. You should all be finding ways to encourage your spouse every single day.
Well, and I think,
Sometimes it's hard, especially after you've had an argument.
Yeah.
I would go to that person
yeah.
that I trusted.
Okay.
Yeah, so what she was saying is she goes to a person that she trusts
Okay.
and asks them, could you tell me something positive about my spouse?
Okay.
Which I think is a good thing. Sometimes we can get so caught up in how terrible my spouse is that sometimes getting somebody else's perspective about how, one decent thing about them is something we can hold on to and grow from.
Okay. So I'll give a chance for one more question if you have one. Anybody? Oh, okay, Matthew?
How do you guys manage your personal finances, and what are some ways you guys plan and invest together?
Okay, so the question is about finances and the best way to manage that. I'll say something. Allison's an accountant, so she's she's way more knowledgeable of this. But I will say this is communication is a really, really critical part about talking about it and having a plan to work out. We when we do meet pre-marriage counseling, we always say, who's going to take care of the finances? Is one of you more likely to be a spender? Is one of you more likely to be irresponsible? Some of you more frugal? And so we talk about that ahead of time so they understand each other and go. But Allison, what would you say about finances?
Be honest, talk a lot, talk about it, especially like in our situation where Chris makes the money and I spend it. Sometimes he'll be like, what do you mean we don't have any money? I made all this money. Sorry, bud.
I got new shoes, right? Exactly.
I'm an accountant, but that doesn't mean I'm not bad at, I'm good about not spending money. I just know where it goes. No. No. But so many couples that we've helped over the years, like the wife will have a safe deposit, a P.O. box because she has credit cards that her husband doesn't know about. I mean, there's people that, they hide things, gambling. There's a lot of things that people do with money, sins that come out. So it's really, really important to be honest and talk and help each other with it.
Yeah. Finances are typically a reflection of your communication and bringing out behavior in you that isn't good. So the communication really is critical. It's like that about every part of your marriage, which we could do a whole seminar on communication, but I think you got to talk about it. And right now, if you're married and you're having trouble, talk to somebody. If you're single and you're having trouble managing money, learn how to do that, because it'll change your life. Because if you're always stressed out because you're wasting money, it makes life really challenging. It creates a whole negative atmosphere around you. Sure.
And there's got to be trust and respect between you and openness, like you were saying.
Right.
If those aren't there, then that's a big red flag for a relationship.
All right, Nick, you want?
I just want to make a comment.
Okay.
One of the things that, well, obviously through marriage counseling with Chris and Allison, we talked about this, but definitively over the last especially 2-3 years, we've like really started looking at it. It's amazing when you wrap your arms around what your finances are. Like, it really works way better if you can actually control it, right? One of the things we do is a budget meeting. Every month we do a budget meeting, and typically I'm the one managing our finances, but the key is not only does she get a vote, she has to have a vote. And so she can't say, oh, you're doing it good. Like, she has to have a comment. She has to say something. She's got to give a correction, give a direction, something. She's not allowed to just say, I trust you. And it just brings it kind of ties us together. So, that's my comment.
All right. Thank you. Dinah?
One other thing, make sure that you share the information between each other, because with health issues that come up, I manage it, and you need to do a better job at that. I manage our money, but know where the passwords are, like meet together and actually go over it. Because
Right.
if something happened to me, he's gonna be up in pressure. He knows where the book is, but share that information. It shouldn't just be one person.
Right.
Doing it.
Yeah, I do think all those things are critical. It's also important that you make a plan of how you're going. Each person should have some money. There's so many things about this, but the key is communication. You don't want one person manage money. Allison does manage it. I get it. I don't know a lot of times what I make, actually, because it varies all the time. And I don't want to have to go and say, can I have $1 so I can buy a Coke? So we give each person has a certain amount of money that they can spend on their own. Those are really simple things, but really, really valuable on that. For a comment only, but if you got a comment, that's good.
I know we haven't been married for very long, but the way we do it I really like is since he gets paid more, he does 80% of his into our joint account, I do 70 of mine, and then we split the others into our fund money accounts, and then we tithe from there. So it makes it easier to like, oh, this is like our money for all the bills, or like groceries, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or if I want to like go buy something at 10, and then like if it's more than 100 in our fund account, then we just go to each other and go, hey, like this is more than 100, kind of want to buy this, and then like we add up each other's eyes.
So the concept is putting your money together, but depending on how you want to set it up, is to each person have some money that they can spend on they want to. I like to do that because Allison knows everything, so I like some so I can, if I want to buy a gift, she knows what it is. So again, it's good to be able to have that, communicate with that. I think that's really valuable. Guys, we're going to finish up. It's 8:15. I encourage everybody to have some great fellowship. Next week, think about your child raising questions. Again, we all in this room are raising a bunch of children in this church, all right, together. So everybody has a role in this. So if you have questions about it, things you want to bring up, things you want to ask, we encourage you to do that. That will be really, really good. Any last comments? Anyone? You guys good? So let's say a prayer real quick. God, we thank you so much for this night. Thank you for the opportunity to meet together. Thanks for the hearts of every person here. It was really encouraging to me, Father, to see so many singles asking questions about marriage. I appreciate that. I pray, God, that we can all help each other to become more like Christ, whatever relationship that we're in. Please, though, Father, be with our marriages. Help them to glorify you. Help them to be a light to the world around us. Help us to continue to grow more in love with you, more in love with each other, that we can be that cord of three, that strand that's held together by you. Thanks for your love. Thanks for your mercy. And thanks for Jesus. It's in his name that we pray together. Amen. Have great fellowship, guys. Thank you, everybody, for being here.